Welcome to the Beyeler Foundation. Welcome to this talk tonight. Does everyone hear me? Should be, well, I try to talk louder. It's my habit to talk very, very sort of not loud, which is a habit I should change, of course. At least tonight. Anyway, our guest of honor today is one of the most important painters of our time, who honors us in having agreed to do an exhibition at our place from November to March next year. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to Peter Doig. Peter, when we talked yesterday about your exhibition, we have a little small-scale model where we sort of did the display. There were other models in the same room, and we saw that you are more or less surrounded by tradition. First comes the Courbet show, Gustave Courbet, and then comes the Gauguin show. You are sort of embedded in older masters. How do you feel? If it's a problem for you, how do you feel when it comes to tradition? What does tradition mean to you in your painting? Right. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me speaking? No? Oh. Well. I suppose, first of all, it's quite intimidating for a contemporary painter to be showing with, first of all, with Courbet, then with Gauguin. Daunting, to say the least. But yeah, to see how one's paintings look, not in comparison, but just next to sort of what we know as kind of real masters. What was the question again?
What's your relation to tradition? Is it very important for you? Or are you really influenced by?
I'm interested in this tradition, of course, but I don't really know how I feed off it, because I don't think there's the same type of influence now for a painter that there was maybe 100 years ago, where there were masters, or there were artists that you followed in the steps of because they were the ones sort of paving the way for new developments in painting or in art. So I think it's very different now, but and it may seem strange to take influence from artists from such a long time ago.
I thought it very inspiring to talk with you about Gustave Courbet, because you seem to be, well, you said something wonderful about he molds with paint and about his use of paint. I mean, he's so that's actually why I asked this. Does it mean something as a painter? The painting technique, is it important for you, or do you take something from that? Or
I mean, it depends on the painting, really. Depends on my painting, I suppose. I'm interested in different types of technique to suit the subject of the particular painting. Some paintings, require maybe something a bit more traditional or realist, and then I might look at Courbet. I mean, I was actually very influenced by a Courbet painting that will be in this exhibition, of hunters in the snow with a dog. It's in Rome. I've never seen it before, but I've seen images of it, of course. And I like the very sort of plain straightforwardness of it. There's nothing kind of fancy about it, really. I just liked the way it was so direct. And at that point in time, I was making paintings of skiers, and I wanted them to look very kind of just very direct, very sort of get away from sort of the technique of painting, as it were, just be very plain. So I suppose that's one way that I've been influenced by Courbet. Or maybe the painting I made is a painting of a man walking with an umbrella by a wall as well. I was thinking of Courbet, but also of Hopper, maybe.
I mean, the painting by Courbet is really very much about this contrast between very dark color and very bright color, very white and very black. And that's
Yeah, I mean, I was, I think I was very influenced by his use of the silhouette, you know, the silhouette of the figure.
All right.
And yes, as you say, that's made more powerful by the kind of, is that me? Made more powerful by the white.
Okay.
The white of the snow.
As Courbet, you are a wonderful painter of snow. Does it have? What does snow really means to you? I mean, it's just in your painting. I mean, you are a great skier, I hear, and you like snow.
I don't know about great, but I wanted to bring. I suppose about 20 years ago, so I wanted to bring sort of more of my own actual experience into painting, and I also wanted to bring what I thought of were subjects that had been neglected by painting. I wanted to bring subjects to painting, to my paintings that you know, I thought were kind of had been neglected or never even sort of been used in painting, and skiing seemed to be something that was you know, in some ways a really bad subject for painting, because it was so sort of normal in a way. Mm-hmm. It was so white and so sort of middle class and so sort of, I don't know, just unexpected as well. Mm-hmm. And then I just thought that, I don't know, I could just try this out. And then by doing so, I found that I had to paint it a different way, because I was trying to sort of paint things like snow. I had made some snow paintings before as well. So, I mean, a lot of it was tying in with just like effect. And the first snow paintings I made were very sort of effect-driven and became almost like a way of using the material in an abstract way for me. But then going back to Courbet and the paintings I'm referring to, they were effect-less in a way. I mean, the effect was gone. I wanted to remove the effect. I wanted to remove the sort of the mannerism of sort of having screens and, you know, excess use of paint.
I mean, in our exhibition, there will be a section with these snow paintings, with these screen-like paintings with sort of falling snow. You have the feeling that you look through a sort of kind of curtain of white paint, of white snow.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, that was I saw a painting actually in Switzerland in Winterthur. It was a Bruegel painting of the Adoration of the Kings in the snow, and I was interested in the way that there was just like this kind of screen of snow over the front of the painting. It was like he painted the painting and then he'd put this screen that you look through, and this sort of suggested that it was winter or it was snow. And so I think at that time I was really interested, like, yes, in effects. And then I thought, this is getting too easy in a way, like it's become a mannerism, and it's become, I started getting annoyed by my own paintings, and so I wanted to make a much plainer painting. And that's when I started looking at Courbet maybe and Hopper as well.
Okay. But are you actually, it's a terrible question perhaps, but let me ask it. Are you actually telling stories? I mean, that's well. Are you telling stories, or are you working on
well, I mean, there's always an anecdote, there's always a story, and there's always often an incident. There's often an experience, but I don't know how important that is to anyone else other than me. I mean, if I don't have that, I wouldn't make the painting.
Okay.
But it's not. They're not other people's stories. I kind of avoid. You asked me earlier today if I read poetry and I ever made paintings sort of influenced by poetry, and I said no, I don't. I said, but I know that there is a connection between the two, but I purposely try and avoid other people's stories.
How do you sort of develop an idea? I mean, you have an idea and then you begin to make a drawing, or can you tell us something about the process you are?
The process.
The concept.
The process often comes from seeing something, seeing either witnessing something, or witnessing something and then taking a photograph to recreate that, possibly. It doesn't have to be something extraordinary, it just can be something very ordinary, but just the combination of things. I mean, in this case, it's what you don't see that was interesting to me, which is behind this wall there was a cemetery. I mean, the painting's not really meant to be about sort of death or contemplating sort of mortality, but it was somehow in my mind, and I don't think I would have made the painting otherwise. It wasn't about the wall. It wasn't really about the wall. It was what's behind the wall.
And the shape.
You know, I think people who know that place, they would recognize that by the wall, the height of the wall, the type of fire hydrant. There's people who would know that place, and they have a very different feeling for that painting than maybe people who don't. So, but it's the same with any painting. I mean, you can't step inside the head of you know, Manet, for instance. Not saying compare myself to Manet, but I mean, you can. You know, there are other things that are present that make these, I think, good paintings, powerful paintings.
Your use of images, photography, is it, how do we, you're not really painting after photography, but you use it as an inspiration?
I try to avoid painting from photography. I mean, I think that, you know, upstairs you have a Richter exhibition and there's a lot of paintings from photography. Mm-hmm. And I know he's a pioneer in that type of painting, but as far as I'm concerned, it's something that became totally sort of ubiquitous, really. This use of, you know, trying to reproduce the feeling of a photograph in a painting, and I'm not interested in that at all. But I'm interested in the information you may get in a photograph that you can't get in real life, and you can't get from your imagination.
But there's Bonnard, for example, who use photography.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, I think there's many ways to use a photograph.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps in a similar way you do. He was sort of using it as a sort of starting point to.
I think it's a good tool for a painter.
You once said one should talk about collages when one talks about your paintings. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I think a lot of the paintings are collaged images, collages that become sort of images.
So how do you?
Well, that's.
Is it?
Sometimes I literally would make a collage and then make the painting, you know, after the collage, or it's just elements collaged together. Because
your paintings really don't look like collage. So and that is what you of course try to avoid, apparently. That sort of that one sees this working process. Or?
I think it's just, again, it's just a tool, really. Like a collage is just a way of piecing things together, isn't it? It doesn't have to look like what one thinks of a collage.
So if you have an idea, are you going to the studio just at once and try it out, or are you carrying it around a long time, or how should we? If you like to talk about this,
I think quite a long time. I mean, I'm working on a painting now based on a photograph that I found in a naturist handbook in 1979 when I first started as a student. Mm-hmm. And I've always been fascinated by this photograph, but I've never really felt I was ready to sort of use this particular image, mm-hmm. which is of a nude woman. But I still don't know if I can do it. But I'm trying to do that now. But I mean, I have had this image, and I've had this sort of image in my mind and in my possession since, let's say, 1979. Mm-hmm. That's one example.
And I mean, one of your most famous paintings, this canoe, is just called 100 Years Ago, Carrera. Yeah. And it shows. We have it. It comes up here. Yeah. One of the versions. It shows someone sitting in this canoe and again asking about the stories you tell. I mean, when I look at this painting, I'm an art historian. I'm, if you like, perhaps a very traditional art historian, because I'm doing very often the older stuff, and I'm very happy about doing something with the contemporary artists. At times, of course, I try to establish this kind of story. But if I think about your paintings, story-wise, I always feel like coming to a dead end, and then I sort of begin to think about your use of color and how you display color. I mean, this is for me, you are the most wonderful colorist, and you use color in a most spectacular way. So that really gets away from stories. It's just about composition. I mean, can you say something about this?
Well, I don't think this painting's really got any real story, really. It's more about, I suppose, composition and feeling. I suppose feeling. I wanted to get a feeling of, I suppose, just being sort of lost, being adrift. I know it sounds sort of very simple, but that was what I was trying to achieve. I mean, this painting was very influenced by a Matisse painting that I saw in St. Louis, which is the Three Bathers with the Turtle, which I also find has a kind of non-narrative, really, and it has a story. Yes, a story, but what is that story? It's impossible to sort of. It's not even a matter of unraveling. It's just there. It's just apparent. But what is it? And I think that this painting, in a way, came about in the same. One referring to that, but also not really wanting to have a deliberate narrative.
What about your use of color? Do you experiment very much with the technical side of color? Do you? You once told me you use lavender oil. Or you experiment with lavender oil. Are you doing your own colors? Are you sort of like Klee did, for example? Courbet didn't, by the way. He used house paint. House paint? Yes. I think he bought sort of masses of house paint and just mixed it together, and that's it.
Oh, really? No, I mean, it depends. I mean, that painting, the 100 years ago, was basically oil paint from the tube. That's typical, you know, just, I mean, experimenting with color, I don't know. I mean, I just think it comes about through trial and error, really. I mean, the canoe wasn't red, for instance, to start with.
Yeah, but, okay.
But then the shape wasn't as long as it was when it started. It just seemed to kind of like evolve into that.
Okay. But it's true, you use this lavender oil as
lavender oils, but that's just a medium. That's just like a thinner.
As a medium, yeah, right.
Yeah. It's just an alternative to turpentine, because turpentine makes you so ill.
All right.
Yeah. After some time, it starts to make you very sick.
Yeah, but so your paintings smell wonderfully.
It smells of lavender, yeah.
Okay. You are a teacher. You like to teach, apparently.
I'm not really a teacher, but I have a class of students, young artists or younger artists than me.
So, how do you select? Are they all painters, or?
Some are most are painters, but some others as well.
So what do you teach them? I heard that you actually go in a couple of days. You go to Ornans, to Courbet's birthplace.
Yeah, I mean, I just think. It's an experience. I mean, I think it's all an experience. And I think that when you are in that period of your life as an artist, when you're working amongst others, that's a very, it's a very important time. Whether you like it or not, whether it's kind of whether you react against it or not, it's just it's an important time. It's a unique time because once you leave and you're working on your own, which seems can go on for sort of an eternity. It's just very different. You never have the same relationship with your fellow artists as you do with your fellow students. It's just very different.
So when you started, you started the St. Martin's School in London in the late 70s, I think.
I studied at St. Martin's, yeah, and then I went to. After that, I went to I took about 8 years working on my own, and then I went back for 1 year to Chelsea School of Art.
So, what did actually make you go back to art school after having worked for a long time? In stage design, I think, in Canada.
No, I think I felt I needed that sort of momentum again that you get from being in a student situation, and needed that not just momentum, but the time where time, basically time stands still, and you're just, you're stuck in that type of. I don't know. It was just for me. The time was right. It felt to do that again.
Because I went to London recently and saw this extremely interesting show about your early work. Work you were influenced by St. Martin's School. All these Superman looks at Gotham City paintings, which I found quite interesting. I mean, you seem to have worked in a group then more than later. You know what I mean? You sort of broke away, I think, of groups and sort of found a very unique way in Chelsea. Or after Chelsea.
I think that the early 80s, which is when I was at St. Martin's, was a very exciting time to be a painter. And I think the early 90s was very different, or late 80s or early 90s was very different. I mean, early 80s, it just seemed to be a lot of freedom, a lot of openness. It wasn't just to do with the fact being young. I think that there was a lot of the art that was being made was in painting, and in music was very open to outside influences, outside of art, and I think I really benefited from that. I was right for that ready for that at that time, and then I went back to study again in the late 80s. I think that the art world had become possibly more cynical, and painting had become extremely boring. I think there's a lot of process-based painting going on. A lot of actually what you're starting to see now again. Sort of, people come up with an idea and they kind of make many versions of that idea, and again, that was a good time for me to study because I wanted to react against that as well. I wanted to try and do something that sort of was opposed to that, and that's where I started making these kind of Canadian sort of influenced sort of homemade paintings. It was a kind of deliberate sort of action to sort of make something that was not just against the trend, but against the sort of the kind of the attitude as well.
But you had, the result was immediate success in a way. I mean, apparently you.
Well, I think it gave me, which I think is what all artists need, it gave me something to kind of run with, really. And I really, I went from feeling like I didn't have very many ideas to suddenly feeling like I had a lot of ideas. It was almost like I got this sort of inspiration that I could never possibly have imagined. And I think that I think the type of artist I am, you never really know what you're going to make next, and whether you will, it's not as if there's a plan really. So I think that when you get these kind of bursts of inspiration, and that it's kind of like what fuels you really.
And what keeps you going? It's
what keeps you going, and I just don't think I could have ever imagined that this would have happened. A year before, it just sort of suddenly just happened, and it started snowball. It snowballed, and then I just said, I'd found one thing after the other, which sort of I'd want to paint. Other times in your life, you find it's much slower, really, and it's sort of like you can reflect on what you've done, but at this point in time,
is it still like that? Is it?
I mean, I think I'm at the moment I'm a bit slower. I'm always hoping. I'm always hopeful.
What does success mean to you? It's a terrible question again, but an interesting one. I mean, because you are very successful.
Supposedly, yeah. I mean, I don't feel that when I'm in my studio. I mean, that's the only way I can. I think you're always confronted by a blank canvas, really, and or paintings that aren't finished, and that to me is that's how I avoid thinking about what success is, really. I don't know. I mean, success, yes, is maybe having an exhibition at the Beyeler. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, but it's not. I mean, that's a great thing, but it's that's success, not other things.
I mean, probably Louis Stevens said once, the real success is to labor. Would you say this is true? Or?
I suppose success is, you know, being able to enjoy what you do. But I can't say that I always do. But when I do, I do.
Yeah. But are you very much? You talked about music scene. Are you very much influenced by music? I mean,
I don't think I am any more than any other artist. I don't know an artist who doesn't really listen to music when they're either when they're working or. I mean, I think that it's a bit of a myth that I'm really influenced by music. I do like music, of course, but I don't. I can't think of any one painting that's directly influenced by music.
But you made
maybe that would be awful.
But you made this wonderful painting of these massive cinema loudspeakers, which are in there.
Oh, that's true. Yes.
So there must come something from.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was more interested in the monolithic shape than.
Right.
Of course, I like music that can come out of them, but it's more about in those paintings. It was more about the shape and the fact that someone felt that they had to stand next to it, right, or stand on top of it.
So you just mentioned drifting or drift.
Yeah.
Richard Schiff once wrote a very nice, not only very nice, very good essay about you, which he called Drifter, in a very wonderful book about your work. Drifting. I mean, you from your youth, you sort of traveled a lot. You were born in Edinburgh, then your family went to Trinidad, and then you went to Canada, I think, I'm right?
Yeah.
And then you came back to England. Or you came to England to London.
Yeah, I'd never lived in England before. I was 19. Yeah.
And then you went back to Trinidad, and the exhibition we saw last year, which just ended in Montreal, the second venue, was about your years in Trinidad. I mean, obviously, Trinidad plays a very important role in your work, but is your work really sort of very much related to the place you live, or is it? I mean, what would you say? I'm asking because you said something very nice or very interesting about Gauguin. You said something. You feel that the tropical nights or something in his paintings. In there. Tropical nights.
Nights.
Sort of, 12 hours of night.
Yeah, exactly. I said I think that, and I made that people associate the tropics with brightness and sun and all that. But yes, of course there is that. But there's also many months of rain, and then there's also every day there's 12 hours of darkness, because it gets dark at 6 o'clock every day throughout the year, and I think people forget that really. So I think there is a darkness there as well. And
you see this in Gauguin's work, but would you say that?
Yeah, I can't remember the painting we were talking about specifically, but we were, that's what I was talking about. And yeah, I'm interested in that. I mean, I suppose I'm interested more in the atmosphere of Trinidad, or how you can convey that atmosphere in painting than in being a Trinidadian painter. I mean, I'm not a Trinidadian, and I don't propose to sort of reflect or even sort of make comments really about their society. But I'm very influenced by the atmosphere of being there, or having been there.
Mm-hmm. We're just looking at one of your.
That's actually quite close to here, I think.
It's a fantastic painting, because for me it's an art historian. It's a comment on modernism. You see through wood, through trees, on a famous building by Le Corbusier, the ultimate modernist in architecture, and you just I think you visited this building before it was pulled down, or before it was totally refurbished, and it was in a state of sort of in a ruinous state, and I think that's interesting that one looks from nature or from wood, from a jungle, on this very structured modernist facade. I mean, is it interpretation you would think is good? Or?
Well, I was interested in this building, of course, for the architecture, but much more so for the setting. And prior to this, I'd made many paintings of other sort of dwellings, very sort of humble houses. I was often interested in architecture that was kind of anthropomorphic, homemade, self-designed houses that kind of look like, faces, or they could have been designed on a sort of pumpkin, cut out on a pumpkin to show where the windows might be going. And then this building, I visited this building. I spent actually quite a lot of time in this building, and it's quite close to Verdun. And there's many military graveyards in this area. I mean, many people lost their lives in the war there. And the woods are very kind of somber. And then the building is, when you kind of turn your back on the facade of the building and you walk into the woods and then you look back at it, I was actually very surprised at seeing the kind of the facade of this modernist facade broken by the trees, and I felt it was like people looking at me through the trees, and that's what attracted me to it. I thought it felt haunted and haunting.
Someone said you are influenced by horror movies. Oh, you are actually. You once said you were influenced by a horror movie, which I.
Horror movies? No, I'm not actually. But
it had this horror-like quality, this sort of feeling of this uneasiness, this sort of haunted thing.
It actually reminded me of, to be honest, it reminded me more of paintings. It reminded me of, well, obviously, like a Bocklin painting. Look, when you see like the gleam of a building through nature, or Cézanne as well. Like when you see Cézanne paint, I don't know. There's something quite sort of sad about Cézanne paintings, I find, like his paintings of architecture. And it was a kind of atmosphere. It was the atmosphere I was interested in. I mean, this is not so interesting, the facade, even though of course it's a great piece of architecture, but to paint it, I'm not interested in painting that.
Yeah. That's another painting. Yeah. Okay. So you paint atmospheres more than stories. Oh,
possibly. Yeah. I don't want to be pinned down to.
You sort of want to confer feelings or atmosphere.
Very difficult to talk. I mean, it's very difficult to say why you make a painting, or what you're trying to achieve in a painting, because I don't think it's. You can't really. It's not really something to talk about. Really, it's more just something that when it's ready, and that sounds maybe like not enough. But
when is a painting ready in your?
Well, exactly. When is a painting ready? There were some pictures there of paintings of mine that were supposedly not ready, and now when I look at them, I thought they looked like they were ready. So yeah.
You can't say when.
Oh, when is a painting ready? I don't know. That is too. You can't say. I mean, it's like ask any students. The amount of times that someone walks into their studio and says, "Leave that. Don't do any more to that." And it's in the end of the day. That's not your decision. That's not your. You shouldn't be. Well, you can say that, but it's not your decision. It's the decision of the artist. The artist has to be able to make that. They have to be able to say that for themselves, and that's one of the most difficult things to learn, if you can learn it, because it's a feeling, really. It's not about the amount of paint on it.
So painting is really.
I mean, I actually got a funny story about the ski jacket painting, because when I made it, at the time I hadn't exhibited very much, and I'd been accepted into this exhibition, or invited to be in this exhibition at the Hayward Gallery in London, which was a painting sort of survey exhibition. And there was this guy who was a kind of collector in London, and he'd sort of been brought to my studio, and he said when this painting was finished, he would like to buy it. And so he came to the exhibition, and he said, "Oh, that painting's not finished." And so he didn't buy it. But it's like that was, he made the decision it wasn't finished.
Right.
Even though I'd already decided it was finished, obviously, because I put it.
So you would say that painting basically is decision making all the time.
Yeah, decision making, and I don't know, just feeling that it's not trite. It's not like a trite decision to do. I mean, you can make a brush stroke and it can be like a trite sort of thing. It's got to be something that's kind of needs to be there in a way.
Okay. I think we should give you the chance to ask questions if there are any. Yes, please. Can we?
When did you move to Trinidad, and what was the reason actually you went there?
Oh, well, actually, I went there first in 1961, and I was there for 5.5 years as a child, and then I went again I was 33 years later. I was invited to do an artist residency in 2000, and I went, and I didn't really know what to expect. Going back post Trinidad becoming independent, being a sort of going back to a former colony. I just didn't really know what to expect really, and I kind of found that I met a lot of people I liked, and I had a strong memory of what I'd left 33 years ago. So I decided to stay.
So it was nostalgia, some sort of nostalgia?
I don't think it was nostalgia. It was more like, I mean, for instance, I can remember going to Barcelona in 1981 when I was a student in London, and just thinking this was the most incredibly exciting city, because it felt to be so different felt quite, Eastern, on the edge of something, and it was very different to anything I experienced. And I thought, that's Port of Spain felt the same to me. It felt like this kind of place that was an exciting city that had a lot of unknown elements to it that were exciting. I mean, I think that every once in a while you experience something like that in your life. And I mean, at that point in time, I didn't go to Barcelona to live. I went to visit, but you know what I mean? It wasn't really to do with nostalgia, because although I had memories of Trinidad, I was much more interested in the Trinidad of the present rather than the past. Yeah.
Any other questions? The artist is present. I mean, you can ask questions.
You don't have
if not, we can just go on. We are showing a selection of prints in our exhibition. You told me some experimental prints. You apparently like to sort of play with printing or sort of try things out. You sometimes apparently made prints first and then develop paintings. So what does print? Is it?
I think my prints are quite traditional, really. I mean, they're just etchings, but I think that etching, etching is a good medium for a painter, and it's a way of doing things. You're not always in control of it in a way, and I found that if sometimes I made etchings alongside paintings of the same subject, that I would get information that I needed to actually complete the painting.
When you say control, how much are you in control when you paint? Is it?
Well, that's a good point too, because I think there's a huge element of lack of control needed.
Okay.
But then you sometimes might have to sort of correct that. You might sort of have a night where you have, or many nights of like sort of in a way, kind of losing control of the thing. But then you don't want to give up on it, and then you kind of.
So there's a sort of kind of play between control and
I think that I don't think there's any painting of mine that I think is a good one, a successful one that hasn't had many many moments in its making that have been sort of where you just feel like it's on the point of ruin.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, please. Could you wait for there's a microphone coming too. Thank you.
How's your feeling when you give your paintings away, when they go, when they leave you?
It's my father had this friend who was a painter, and he had this sign on his door as you went out of his studio. It said, "Reality ends here." And I always took it as, first of all, I thought, oh, reality ends here because this is my world of painting. But actually, I started thinking, well, maybe the reality of the painting ends here once it goes out of the door, because a different life of the painting begins. That's whether you give it away, you swap it, you sell it. You have at that point in time, I realize you just lose control of it, really, and it takes on a life of its own. I mean, it's like I don't mind paintings going whatever way, sell, trades, give, whatever. If I still know where they are somehow. But the frustrating thing is when you lose track of where they are, and that happens. That's what I realize happens is that there's many paintings of mine I don't know where they are anymore, because they get sort of into the system. And so when you're making an exhibition, it becomes difficult, because you only make so many in a lifetime. You're only going to make so many paintings, and you want to be able to sort of bring ones together that make a cohesive showing, and so some disappear.
And when these paintings coming back into a show, are you extremely excited, or is it a meeting old paintings, old acquaintances, old friends, or?
Well, I remember when the last big show I did of this type, where there was paintings from many, over the last, say, 30 years, was the show I did at the Tate. And that was quite terrifying when I saw a lot of the paintings from the early 80s, because all I could see was the technique as to how they were made. And it was like the technique was kind of sticking off the paintings on stalks at me, kind of like, and I realized that I was always sort of running away from sort of technique in a way, and sort of, as I said before, mannerism or stylisms. And I thought I'd got to a point where I'd sort of moved away from that, but it was, I think once this exhibition was hung, and we had got some sort of, I don't know, made some sort of, once the exhibition on the wall, I kind of came to terms with that, but yeah.
So could an exhibition be a kind of starting point for new work, or?
I think it's important to see your own work, and sometimes you don't really see it until you have a situation like that.
Mm-hmm. Any more questions?
Can you talk something about the lines? Because you talk about the colors, but now I want to see.
Oh, the line, yeah.
Here, something about the lines. Because sometimes you have geometric and sometimes you have like from the nature. Okay.
It was actually just something I was attracted to, and I realized I did it years ago. I mean, I made a painting which will be in the exhibition called The House That Jacques Built. It's now in Tel Aviv, and in a way I wanted to, at that time I was making paintings that had sort of somewhat abstract elements in them, and in this case it was I was thinking about sort of artificial brick, this kind of like tar paper bricking that they used to have on houses in Quebec, in this part of Canada where I lived when I was younger, and I don't know, I just became, I suppose, interested in how you can sort of tighten up a painting by adding lines and referring to something, but ultimately it's just an abstraction. And then I saw other things over time that reminded me of that, like the stacking of beer cases, for instance, and then the random colors that you get with that, in that stacking, and being attracted to that. And then, and this was actually pretty much a direct copy of a wall I saw outside a bar in Port of Spain, Trinidad, where a painter had started to paint all these flags on the wall and then had stopped at a certain point. So I wanted to kind of reference that. But I suppose it's just like a way of creating order, really. Thank you.
Another question over there.
Did you ever try making sculptures?
No. No. Not yet. Bronzes.
What would you tell to potential collectors who are interested in your work, and where should they start?
That's a funny question. Never thought about that. I don't know. I think if I was a potential collector, I would look at. I think I would. I don't know. I would go and look at younger artists' work, maybe. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of out of my control, that, really. It's not really my, not the business of selling my own work. I don't know, really. I mean, yeah.
Do you still do editions?
Yes, of etchings and prints, yeah.
And what importance does that have in comparison to the originals, to the paintings?
Well, I mean, I think an etching is an original, is an original, but to make it possible to make an etching, you have to edition it, and maybe that's a way of answering the other question. You can buy an etching. It's a procedure, and in a way it needs to be funded. I suppose.
Another question. Oh, okay.
I wanted to know what role your movie posters played in your body of work, and are they the counterpoint to canvases that sometimes are worked on for a span of years? Is your way of doing something very quick and gesturally?
That was really a way of just enjoying making things, and also actually referring to someone else's work in the making. And actually, it was interesting doing this show of early work, because I hadn't really taken in how similar they were to what I did when I was much younger. And I mean, they served a purpose, but I think they were. Yeah, it was just a way of sort of doing something incredibly quickly, and having that kind of freedom. And to begin with, just being sort of not even thinking about them as being sort of really like art objects, but just being on the wall for one evening. And then there's a stack of them sort of developed, and then it became a kind of interesting to see them as a group. I've never really shown them individually. It's just like a kind of group, and then they start to take on a different type of formation.
You want to know? The gentleman over here.
The paintings I know are all figurative. Have you ever worked on abstract paintings? Any thoughts about this?
Not really, no. I mean, I think that there's obviously a lot of abstract elements in my paintings, but so are they in most people, in Courbet, for instance, or in Velázquez or whoever. I think there's that's what I like about painting. Really, there's so much. If you take just a part of a painting, it's just a piece of color on cloth, and that to me is a kind of abstraction, really. but I haven't really had the desire to make, you know, pure abstract painting, or maybe even what someone like Richter does upstairs, where you're kind of you know, you remove all imagery, really.
You once said you don't like discourses. Is this true? Or discourse like figurative abstract? Or
That's true, yeah. I don't really like that too much.
Any other questions? Please.
Which other contemporary artists influenced you, apart from Courbet or modern painters, but artists from our generation or post-war period?
I mean, I suppose so many, but I mean, very, very contemporary. I can't really say who influenced me. I know what I like, but I don't think of it as being influenced. But I mean, lots. I mean, post-war painters. There's so many. Yeah, I can't really say.
Did you look at a lot of art during your youth, or were you influenced? Did you look at modern art, or did you go to galleries a lot? Not really, no. It was only really when I got into my 20s. My family didn't really take us to. I can't actually ever remember going to an exhibition with my family when I was young. Actually, once I saw a Hockney show. But it wasn't something we did, really. Any other questions? Okay. Peter Doig, thanks very much.
Thank you.
We opened this exhibition on November 23, and we do another talk right after that, I think. And then we could talk about, perhaps more about how you became a painter, about this show. And you all should come back to this show and see the wonderful paintings of Peter Doig. Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you very much. Yeah.